today we will start to talk about the value-based framework. So today's agenda will be, first we will have example from last week to tell us why analytics is important to do IoT product development. And we will go through one domain knowledge about maintenance. If the machine is broken up and what we should do, and why analytics can help us to prevent it, and why domain knowledge is important to work on IoT, even we have strong data analytics skills. So I will go through this example to tell you, without domain knowledge, even you are very good in statistics, you may not get true insights. I do believe the managers from Advantech, they will tell you the same thing. Statistics and data analysis only give you correlation. Without domain knowledge, you cannot get right insights. And we'll go through the example. And after that, we'll start to use value-based framework to precisely define the business model. And after that, as I said last week, our teaching team will come here to give you some tutorial about R for the second week. So now we move to the part of analytics with IoT. So we look at this example. This is a Japanese company to manufacture the automated agriculture machine. As you know, the average age for farmer in Japan is, do you want to have a guess? What the average age for farmers in Japan?
67, 30.
30 and 67. So which one is closer, do you know? Actually 65 years old.
Wow.
So the average age for farmers in Japan in agricultural industry is 65 years old. So that's why Japanese company, they try to have automated agriculture system without using any real farmer. So this is a system created by Japan called CASA. This system try to do one thing is they have tractors and the reaper, all this machine without human inside, and you can use your mobile phone to control all these farming machines. And with doing this, as you know, we have IoT sensors on tractor, and they will pass all information such as nutrition ingredients for rice and for the other farming stuffs, and to say now their sweetness is high or low, and whether they have enough watering or not. All this information will pass to the cloud and sent to agriculture managers without any real farmer involving inside. So this basic idea, if now their farmers are very old, how they maintain high quality farming industry in Japan. So that's a system they created. So analyze cloud and tell all this machine how to do farming and planting automatically. If they start to analyze data, and we can see now we have different farm location. And the empty dot is for 2013, and the solid dot is for 2014. For a very delicious rice, usually they hope the sweetness is high enough. So they try to use automated machine to tell us how to move this current location of the ingredients in the rice and move to the upper area. If we can make our plants and rice to have higher output, that means you produce more and more sweet. That means your farming industry is more advanced. So they record data and try to share information among farmers to say how to move this area for current result to the other result. So this is one example of using IoT. So sensor will tell us when we should plant and when we should not plant and what stuff we should plant. So this is one of the applications of IoT. So any questions so far? Is that clear? So if we have that kind of dashboard system here and tell us now is the right timing or not to do planting. So back to the last week example. last week we mentioned about the FANUC, this Japanese automobile manufacturing company. They try to offer service. If the machine has some elements and they think it will be broken, they will repair the elements before it is really off. In this case, they do not need to shut down the production line to save more money. So I do believe most people can understand this idea, but what kind of data, what kind of information we do need to prevent machine failure? We need some domain knowledge. So before we go to domain knowledge, we want to realize why machine repair, that is a big business in manufacturing industry, and we want to see why. So first, we go through some basic definition of systematic risk. As what we tried to say last week, IoT can help us to do better risk management. Have you heard about capital asset pricing model in finance? Have you learned finance? So in the finance, there's one very famous model for us to define the product price. So one basic definition and measure in finance industry to measure risk, we call it beta. So simply speaking, beta is covariance of return from your business model and return from stock market divided by variance of stock market. So for any business model and any business, we can calculate beta value related to their peer on the stock market performance. When I say stock market, I mean such as S&P 500, NASDAQ, and also Dow's industry index. So you can choose different return from market, such as S&P 500, and to decide I forgot. So we can use this to decide whether your business model's performance is more volatile over stock market or not. I already put one reference on SIBA to give you a basic idea of this model. But now, I quickly give you some idea. If beta greater than 1, what does that mean? If you use some statistics or linear regression or machine learning to calculate your beta value of business model related to the entire stock market is greater than 1, that means your risk is higher than the entire stock market. So if your firm or your business model have good performance, largely upon the risk you take, or when market is up, your business up. When market is down, your business down. So you belong to cycle industry. So your performance is not related to your capability. It's all upon market condition, good or not. Okay? So that's quite clear. If beta greater than 1, that means you take more risk than the entire market. If beta less than 1, what does that mean? That means your performance variance is lower than entire stock market. So you take less risk for your business model than entire companies in the all public list industries. So in that case, and you take less risk, so your risk is lower than entire stock market. Okay? So is that clear? So beta greater than 1, you take more risk than entire stock market. And beta less than 1, you take less risk. So we use this as risk measure for your business model. So we can learn this in the Finance 101. And as what we do in last week, if we want to calculate the objective any business model, we use net present value. If your business model lasts for more than 1 period, such as more than 2 years, so you calculate NPV for first year, NPV for second year, and third year, you put summation of them divided by discount factor, because the future value is not equal to the current value. It needs to be discounted. Are you aware of this? So if we back to Finance 101 and also reading I put on CBA, discount value, so discount rate, they are in last week business model objective. You can decompose to risk minus free rate, such as treasury note or government bond. And plus beta. Beta is from the risk you take for your business model times your risk premium. So that is what you have learned in the Finance 101. Usually, free rate is 10 years government bond, such as treasury note. So there is no any risk, zero risk. So if we follow this Finance 101 logic, and we can say present value is important to measure the performance of our business model. So we further decompose it into present value of revenues, how much cash flow you get from selling goods, minus the fixed cost, how many machines you buy, and the plants you have, and the lands you have, minus variable costs, such as labors, and also the other expenditures. Does this make sense? So that's how you get present value for assets you invest in your business model. Now, we go through this idea further. Present value is the fixed number, but we want to measure risk. So we want to treat it as a random variable. So we still go through corporate finance textbook. Usually it will tell us beta, how much risk you take for your business model, can be further decomposed by beta for your revenue. Beta for your revenue and beta for your fixed cost. You can see revenue is here for its risk. So revenue has its own risk. Fixed cost has its own risk. And variable cost has its own risk. In order to normalize, make beta for asset, I make all present value divided by PV asset. Okay? So this is a case we convert deterministic cash flow to stochastic version for calculating its risk. Okay? So now we go through this further. Revenue means the cash flow from selling your goods. So beta definitely is random, no doubt at it. But we look at fixed cost. Fixed costs are from machine you bought and land you bought. That means before generating cash flow from selling goods, you already pay that cost, is it? So beta should be 0 because risk is 0. You already paid, it's already sunk. There's no any randomness generated from the fixed cost. Does this make sense? Okay? So variable costs, such as labor cost, because the wage may be different month by month, depends on economic situation. So beta itself is also stochastic, it has randomness. So based on this idea, we can simplify your business model's risk as this way, and then now we can see beta of your business model equal to 1 plus PV fixed cost divided by PV asset times beta revenue. And do you notice one thing? If PV get bigger, that means you bought land or machine in advance before getting cash flow, and your risk of business model is increased. Can you see this? So that's why Fanuc and Bosch and Google, they want to go to the B2B industry. The reason is if everything you want to run business, you need to buy machine first. You suffer very high risk in your business model. If we change to renting business, you pay rent upon your usage. Using sensor IoT concept, your business model will get less risk for getting cash flow. Is that clear?
One more. That
Yeah.
last point one more time, please.
Okay, I say it one more time. So revenue is a future income. So it's randomness, because no one has crystal ball to predict the future. So definitely, we have risk for future income. This makes sense. And if your fixed cost is bigger and it covers huge proportion of entire asset, and you can see PV get bigger and the risk of your business model also get increased. So for any entrepreneurs and startup, if they can reduce the beta for the asset they put, that means they suffer less risk for the future cash flow. So that's why IoT is attractive in one way. You don't need to buy machine in advance. You can pay by usage, how many hours you use by the machine. As a business, the most important thing, we need to have healthy cash flow. So I try to say why the Japanese agriculture industry and automobile industry, they try to push the renting business model. This is very attractive for many businessmen for their cash flow. Is that clear? So intuition behind this simple mathematical idea from finances, intuition behind this the intuition behind this is that with a higher proportion of assets that are fixed, a business is less able to cope with a big change of the demand. So we make an example here. When market demand is low, okay, market demand is low, remember market demand is low, the business incurred high fixed cost. Then what happens on your cash flow? You already buy your lamps there, your machine is already there, but market demand is low, so you have a lot of redundancy, and your machine is there for idle. Okay? So you have a lot of inventories in your factory. Then your working capital, such inventory cannot move. In that case, you can see your cash flow will not be healthy, so you suffer big risk for not running machine. Does this make sense? Okay. So simple finance theory can tell us we try to reduce fixed cost as a businessman. Okay, so now we move to the next risk any business model faces. We talk about operational risk. So we keep going for the example of machine repair. If now we have one machine in our factory, just one machine. Suppose that machine has a capacity of R. That means R units per hour if there were no risk of it being down. And for the raw material entered to this machine, the rate is RA. If there is no any randomness in the manufacturing, and we can easily to calculate the inventory on processing at your machine will be RA divided by R. So inventory on your production line to produce on that particular machine is RA divided by R, and that's inventory. Okay? But the real world is not such deterministic because we have randomness. So that means we have no any risk, operational risk. So if we add some randomness as a real machine in any factories, now we have two randomness. One is mean time to failure. You cannot know when the failure will occur as Phoenix, their business model, to change repair or to change the broken elements. And the other randomness is mean time to repair. So we look at your capacity now. Your capacity will be R is your biggest output times MTTF is how long your machine close to breaking. So it still can work. Divided by MTTF plus MTTR. So that is revised capacity on your machine. Okay? So if we put this twist in our business model on this single machine, we can see now your capacity lower than this is a machine without any broken risk. Your capacity R. And now you get smaller capacity because you have two randomness. Okay? With such twist, now we have two inventories occur due to randomness. One is inventory at station, and the other is inventory in a queue. Why this occur? If we cannot predict when machine will be down, so RA get into machine for processing is not deterministic. We will see a queue pile up here. Does this make sense? Before RA is constant. And then capacity R, I make assumption here. RA arrival rate is lower than your capacity R. Okay, RA is smaller than R. So no matter what happens, actually nothing will happen because I don't assume machine will be down. And then I can see all the raw material, the elements on production line will be RA constant to move. Is it? Do you understand what I try to say? Okay? But now things is different. Machine may get failure. So this machine may be run for 100 hours. It can be down and cannot work anymore. So this is first randomness I need to overcome. When machine is broken, what the next randomness I need to face? You need to ask the machine provider to come here to repair your machine or change elements, is it? But you also solve how long they can fix the machine. So this second randomness is how long they need to repair. And if this happens, your production speed RA, okay, for here is fine, but you cannot predict the rate on the machine. So this may not be RA anymore. Then you may get more inventory queue here for getting into further process, okay? So in this case, we have two inventory. One is inventory pile up here. The other inventory pile up inside the station. So interestingly, MTTR, if MTTR is bigger, inventory get further. And MTTR get bigger, inventory on the machine also get higher. So mean time to repair, how fast you repair, if you repair is very slow, you have more working capital stocks in your production line. You lost a lot of money. Can you see this? You may ask me how I get these two formula. Actually, I uploaded one paper, a brief introduction on waiting line system. So in this class, this is not factory system class. So I don't go through detail how to calculate it. But I try to tell you what will happen if you know the production line dynamics. And if you decide to do smart manufacturing in an advanced tech project, I will give you even more background reading to know domain. Okay? So any questions so far? Is that clear? If you spend time to repair your machine further, and you have more working capital stock in your production system. So now, we move further. If I have two machines in a sequential manner to produce your goods, and in this case, we start to look at inventory before getting processed on station 2. And we can see this is a formula from factory production line calculation. And this even worse. The reason is in the one station system, your inventory depends by utilization. U divided mu divided by 1 minus nu, and you times MTTR square here. But if we move to sequential system, you can see not only MTTR measures your entire working capital, and you get mu squares here, things get even worse. So this tells us if we have machine work in a sequential manner to produce the goods, and we will have more inventory in our production system. If any broken down happen, our system will be very fragile. We will lose even more money. So we start to look at the second situation. If we have a power to change layout of production line, we can put the two machines not in the sequential manner, but in parallel manner. And we get new formula for inventory before getting into process. And CV means the one measure for variance, and we can ignore this for this class. And if you have interest, you can read assigned reading. So we start to see in the parallel system, while this is larger than the Q inventory for a single station. So what we try to say, in the parallel system, your inventory level is lower than this system, one station system. So when you have more than one machine, you always have high inventory. Then a production system with, you have more than one machine, definitely you have high risk of from working capital over the system with one machine. But if you compare this system to sequential system, and you have lower inventory. So it actually, the parallel system, the inventory is smaller than just the Q inventory for station 2 in sequential station. So this gives us wisdom. If you have chance to change layout of machines, try to do more parallel rather than sequential. And this is happening in the factory dynamics in any production line. So let's put it together. And we can see if we have repair risk and also maintenance risk. This will affect production amount and inventory. Unlike in finance, in the finance, all the risks are often thought of as pool in the portfolio. So if we think about stock portfolio, you try to invest. You have stock A, stock B, stock C, plus some bonds. Do you need to consider stock A, stock B, and the bonds in a sequential manner or a parallel manner? Do you need? Let me get my problem clear. If you have chance to learn Finance 101, or we just say share, you have company A stock, you have company B stock, and you also have some bond. And this is your entire finance portfolio. Do you need to consider the entire risk for your portfolio, such as, okay, I need to calculate risk for stock A, and then stock B, and then total risk upon the bond C? Or do I need to say, actually, it's not the case. A and B will control the beginning risk first, and later all pass to the bond C for risk. So what I'm trying to say is actually in finance, they don't consider this. So there's no sequential and parallel manners in their entire system. So their risk is easier than manufacturing system. Manufacturing system face even higher risk than finance system. Is that clear? So operational process may amplify, increase risk. The reason is the way you change the production layout your business model suffer different risks. But finance, they do not have such problem. Okay? So any questions so far? Is that clear?
Quick question.
Yeah.
You mentioned that manufacturing risks are higher than financial risks. From what I gathered from what you were saying, part of that's because in manufacturing the process is linear, and finance we can come up with a dynamic framework to kind of diversify away those risks. Does IoT make this kind of dynamism possible in manufacturing, or?
Okay, now this is not finance class. In the finance, any finance model, they do not consider how you change the sequence of elements to calculate risk. So this, but in the production or operational or service system, we need to consider the sequence. You put the elements. So that is the first question I answer you. The nature is different. And your second question is IoT. Now we look at IoT. If we have IoT, and for example, I just give you an example. If I cannot avoid to use serial production line, and I have sensor to record inventory on each station. If I start to notice a lot of inventory pile up here, and from this mathematical equation, it tells me if I see more inventory here, that refers to this machine will get broken very soon. Okay? So if you have no any domain knowledge to know how to run factory, you will start collect data, but you try to find out why I have more inventory and in front of the machine refers to the chance of being down for that machine. You may start trying to guess. But if you collect data with domain knowledge, you already know better predict the downtime for the machine is to see how many inventory pile up here. An IoT sensor will give you the data. So when you notice a lot of inventory in front of the machine, even you do not know the inside elements in that machine, you already will start spend time and pay attention to see how likely this machine will get broken. And then you will start to prevent this to occur. But without IoT, you cannot do it. And without domain knowledge, you also do not know it. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. So that's what I try to emphasize, domain knowledge for your business system will help you to better utilize IoT technology and data analysis because you know causal inference and mechanism in your system. Okay, now if you already get an idea why analytics is important for your business model and why domain knowledge is important, we move to the business model product. Last week, we mentioned we will use linear programming to formulate the business model you try to solve. And we have objective function to minimize or maximize the total profit or minimize the total cost, subject to budget constraint or the other factors. And how do we use this technology to formulate the business model? We quickly look at one example. Suppose now we have 3 players in our ecosystem. We have one is the firm, and 2 and 3 are buyers. So we have one firm facing 2 buyers. And use capital GR denote the group R who make transaction. So if AIR, you can see with some A11, A12 as a notation. Now I want to give them the meaning. If AIR equal to 1, if AJI is in group R, and 0, if not, and let BR be the value that can be produced when agent in GR transact on their own. We quickly look at example here. This is firm 1. And put 1 here. That means firm 1 make transaction with buyer 2. Now this means we have 2 buyers. but don't make transaction to the buyer one. Because we have firm one and one buyer and second buyer. Zero means firm one sell product not to the first buyer, but sell product to the second buyer. And it will get the value at least B1. So the firm sell product to the second buyer. And we look at here, this means the firm sells its product to the first buyer, and they should get certain value from the transaction. If you can follow this logic, we look at third line on inequality. If not only buyer one, buyer two in the ecosystem, but this firm does not involve in the transaction, can we produce any value? You have two buyers without any producer. That means value is zero. There is no transaction. Does this make sense? Now we look one further. If now we look at the number 4 equation, if you only have one producer, that is the firm, but no any buyers, can we make any transaction? No, so it's zero. And if now we have only one buyer, and the value is zero, if only with one buyer without seller, it's also zero. So that's a way we convert business model into linear programming. Is that clear? So if you accept this definition, and we can say value is created when an economic good is acquired by an end user. So we need to have one buyer and one seller. So when we make transaction, you get gross value. If you learn economics 101, you know economics, they talk value in a different way. They usually work on net value. You need to use your gross value minus the economic value of inputs or production factor you use to produce the goods. So in this class, we focus on net value. The gross value for selling goods divided by cost of using inputs to produce it. Okay. So, and any business actor appropriate value by obtaining a share of value created by the acquisition of the good. So when buyer and seller they match and we create value. Okay? But one thing you may not learn in the economics 101 is if now buyer and seller they make transaction, they create value. Do you think buyer and seller they need to bargain? Yeah, they need to bargain because if a seller can change the price, if a seller sells higher price, that means seller will appropriate more value from this transaction, and buyer got less value. If a buyer is more powerful, try to convince seller to reduce the price. In such case, buyer will get higher value appropriation, but seller will get less. So the pricing strategy will decide the bargaining between the buyer and the seller. So that's the second situation. Not only the price is sale, you can change price to bargain. So if you can take this idea, we do some thought experiments. Usually we learn in the finance and economics, and we think high value or high price for a company, such as stock share, refers to it is more successful. And if we, from the big view, not only from the seller, low price refers to the buyer, the consumer, actually getting more value. In this case, can we say market prices allocated more value? If higher market price, can we say this company more successful? Okay. And if everything is equal, can we say the firm has lower price, so their profit lower? Can we make the judgment? We start to look at NVIDIA. Have you heard about this company, NVIDIA? And NVIDIA actually is very successful with the GPU, in particular for the AI era, artificial intelligence, because they speed up machine learning. Now we look at stock price for NVIDIA. And relative to S&P 500, S&P 500 is entire the stock market in the States. So we use the NASDAQ index minus S&P 500 and NVIDIA stock price minus the S&P 500. And we can see NVIDIA share price is lower than NASDAQ industry index, but higher than S&P 500. Do you see? So if you look at this chart, if you think NVIDIA price is not high, can we make conclusion NVIDIA is not successful? Can we? Okay. If you learn investment, yep.
Should we be looking at the substitutes and complementary companies to NVIDIA in this case?
We don't go further. We just say all the high-tech industry, NASDAQ. So we can see all the high-tech industry, the average index price is higher than NVIDIA share price. So NVIDIA is behind the NASDAQ index. Okay? And I just want to say price does not refer to success or not. The reason is if we relate investment theory, NVIDIA looks very cheap. For any investor, cheap means if their business model is good and this is value stock, and you should invest it ASAP. If the stock price for NVIDIA is very high, that means it belongs to growth stock. It is saying the company potential already fully represented by the price. If you buy it now, its future growth potential is lower. So I think you heard about the value stock versus growth stock. And based on the investment science and investment theory, we should focus on value stock for long-term performance. Okay? So we cannot use stock price to judge NVIDIA performance because it can be underestimated by market price. So it can signal investors to buy it. So this is just an example. We cannot use market price to judge the firm successful or not. It may be underestimated by market. And we know now we don't want to buy NVIDIA. Why? It's too costly. Okay. Now we look at the second example. When a buyer and the seller, they make transaction in the ecosystem. Can we say the value they create refers to they are successful or not? Maybe not. Have you heard of famous story about the Xerox versus Apple? We made back to 40 years ago. Actually, Xerox developed the GUI, the current Windows system, window icon mouse created by Xerox. But this technology never commercially sold by themselves. So they created this technology, but they never commercialized it. And if you read about the history of Apple, Apple saw this opportunity. And from the Wikipedia, Steve Jobs said, if I can pay 1 million in exchange for look what Xerox do, that's super valuable. So at the end, you know what happened in history? Apple commercialized this system, and then Windows follows. And Xerox never get any profit from this innovation. So from this example, I try to tell you, Xerox created entire this personal computer industry. So it created this industry, create value, but it gets zero profit. And the latecomer, Microsoft, Apple, to get the most profit from value created by Xerox. So value creation from your business model innovation cannot guarantee you will be successful or not if you cannot appropriate economic value in the follow-on periods. So So if you get this idea, you know there are two major forces we need to pay attention to any business model: value creation and value appropriation. So a market is an interactive system of agents such as Apple, Xerox, and Microsoft, where value is created and appropriated. So all the players, the firms, buyers, sellers, and the suppliers, they create value together, but at the same time, they also fight for appropriating or capturing values. So there are tension between value creation and the competition. Okay. And when you create value, and what I said before, we need to bargain how and how much each player to get value they created. So then depends on which kind of strategic action your business model launch to create the pie and then to capture the value. So this is just a very rough idea. You have a bunch of players, buyers, sellers, they work together to make a transaction. After the transaction, you create a pie, economic value, entire pie. And then all the players, buyer and seller, they try to cut the pie. And we call this as ecosystem. We want to use linear programming to formalize how they fight in the ecosystem. So I know this is quite wordy in the last slides. We can use this slide to conclude what they try to say. In the beginning, if we are the focal firm here, we make some initiative, actions. This is the current environment, but the other players, seller, buyer, also make actions, and they interact with each other in these industries. And then what happened? They create value together, and they fight for capturing values and decide their performance. And then industrial status change. They move this fighting in the next round. Is it? So this is what we try to model. We take 10 minutes, 15 minutes break, and we continue. Okay? So the end of last session, we mentioned about market dynamics. When you start to work on one business model, you need to consider how many people play in this game. In economics, we call this as a game. In strategy or management, we call it ecosystem. And buyers, sellers, and competitors, they all make actions, strategic actions. So you make action, and your rival, your buyers also make action, buy or not buy, fight with you or not, or launch a better product or not. All will decide the total value you create and how much appropriate for each partners. So we can use the other chart to visualize these concepts. So all the players in the ecosystem, they create value. The total aggregate and the user value divided by production cost or operational cost. So I think that's straightforward. But the key part will be how each party appropriate value, such as Xerox never appropriate any value for the product it created. So we start to see this. We first look at if now you are one company, one seller, and you think you don't want to participate in this ecosystem. The reason is you can join the other ecosystem, get better value for your production resources, such as your output, your products. In this case, for this ecosystem to hook you, to have you as a partner, this ecosystem needs to give value to you at least not worse than you to join the other ecosystem. So that means appropriation available from next best alternative. This ecosystem definitely needs to give value higher than the other ecosystem you get. Is that okay? So this is opportunity cost concept from economics. In order to have your resources in this ecosystem, they need to pay you better than the other ecosystem. So for example, why Apple want to join the personal computer rather than other industry, such as machine repairing? Because Apple will think, use my resources to work on personal computer or wearable equipment, I earn more than join the machine repairing ecosystem. Is that okay? So that's why personal computer need to pay Apple more. The second competition will be appropriation guaranteed by competition. Now, if we have multiple supply chains in this ecosystem, you can decide which supplier you want to work with. We will see example very soon. And also which buyer you want to work with. So at this, the buyer makes transaction with you, or the supplier makes transaction with you. They need to pay you better than you to work with the other suppliers and buyers. So different suppliers and different buyers, they need to compete for your resources to join their value chain or supply chain or entire business transaction. And in this case, competition will guarantee how much value you will get at least. Okay? So other ecosystem guarantee you have certain value. Competition guarantee you have the other value. Now, we look competitors. Your competitors, more like Apple versus Microsoft, or versus Google for Android versus OS system. So competitors also capture value. At the end, we will have bargaining. Value for competitors, value for the next opportunity, value from competition. Now, bargaining. How much for you to fight to get bigger pie in the value created? All depends on your prestige, your reputation, and your resources, and your innovation capability. And this decides how the final value you get in your ecosystem. So this will be the idea behind the value-based business model we try to focus on. So two paths to innovate the business model. First is, from value creation perspective, we need to work on customer utility. So customer's utility is how much value they have for the product they want to buy, minus the price they pay, so we can get net utility for customers. And for the firms, how much money or profit they earn in their business model depends on flow rate, how many products they sell in a certain period, times the price for their product minus operational factors they pay, such as machine and labors. So if we understand this concept, when we want to build any business model, we try to increase customer utility so that more customers want to buy your product, and also try to reduce your production costs, as what you learn in the basic management and basic economics. Do I speak too fast? Are you there okay? I just realized I speak too fast. Okay? So is that clear for business model innovation? So now we know the difference between customer utility and the profit for the firms to supply the goods. The difference will be the total value created. And now we want to go further from this idea in business model. We move to co-opetition. So this rough idea for the scope analysis. Now we have agent players in any ecosystem. So how many players? Buyers, sellers, suppliers, advertisers, consumers, they are all the players we call agents. And different players, they have resources, more like how many laborers they have, how good the machine they have, and they have capital managers or not, their owners are good or not. And the other entity will be their rivals, their suppliers, and their buyers. So they all fight for this. One thing I want to remind you is here. In this class, we focus on agent appropriation. What the agent appropriation is here. We want to build a business model from this perspective. Total value created by many parties in the ecosystem, and how they bargain for their pie in the system. But this is not typical practice taught in the business school. If you have a chance to go to business school class for business model innovation, actually they teach you the product price orientation. That means they only focus on this. I say it slower. in most business model clauses, they tell you increase customers' utility, so have more functions or more innovative in your products, and then try to reduce your cost. So this is the conventional business model taught in the school. But we do not focus on this. We focus on this. Can you see the difference, subtle difference? If you use this way to build a business model, like the business model canvas, the idea, like value proposition, do you see some blind spots in this idea? You just focus on value you create from your product. But do you remember the mistakes made by Xerox? You forgot to capture your value. Your opportunity cost go to the other industry and the other supplier. They all squeeze the value you can capture. But you go to the isolate or any bookstores to borrow business model innovation books, they never tell you you may not capture the value you create because you all fall into product price, the paradox. This is very easy to understand. Everyone thinks this is a business model, but they forgot. They need to capture value, not just create value. Is that clear? You know what I try to say? Okay, so we don't want to use product price orientation. We want to use agent appropriation perspective to look at business model and make our course is very unique. Okay? So in order to do it, we build a competitive environment for the agents, maybe more than 100, 1,000 agents. In your business project, you will see we can use R to build more than 1,000 agents in our ecosystem to calculate business value and how they transact with each other, how they fight, appropriate, cooperate, and at the end, we will see some subtle difference cannot captured by traditional model. So we look at objective of business model. In order to make linear programming work for us, we need to define objective function. So we make assumption. All the firms, buyers, sellers, customers, they want to maximize net present value. Okay? So the utility for the end user, the buyer, they will decide the gross value produced, how much is the upper bound, because the customer utility decide how high the price you can charge. And then we will focus on how the transaction allocate value. And if we follow this definition, our modeling approach for business model also consists with maximizing shareholders' wealth. You learn in the finance, and investment, and strategic management. You want to increase NPV, so you also benefit the shareholders. If you want to consider more than one period, your business model involves more than one period, multiple periods, maybe 5 years. You can use discounted cash flow to calculate and show in the last week slides. So we can work on dynamic problem. Okay? Now we formalize what we are saying. So for building up ecosystem or competitive environment, we need to define how many players they are agents there, and how many transaction opportunities they have, and relative bargaining ability for them to negotiate price, as my example in the last lecture, and we will see example very soon. And okay. So how much value is produced will depend upon which transaction actually occur. Okay, and value created when product user obtains products. So how do we measure the value created in terms of end user reservation price? If we cannot know the real transaction price, we can use expected value, as you learn in economics. Okay, we also need to decide how firms compete with each other using set theory. And I know now still very abstract. We'll go for example very quick. And for bargaining, the factor is more than competition. So this is quite subtle. I say it again. We're back to this example. Competition decides how much value for rivals. Competition from the other ecosystem decide how much value you guarantee for this ecosystem if you stay. And different sellers, different suppliers compete for you to join their supply chain or value chain, also guarantee your value. But one thing is competition, competitive forces cannot guarantee this range. If there are some certain range for the value remain after considering competition, the rest of value you need bargain depends on your reputation and prestige and what other factors. So only this part competition cannot guarantee, and we call it as bargaining. Okay, so finally, in order to change entire ecosystem, you can make assumption. Your business model will change the way to create and allocate value among the players. And we see why this occurs. Have you heard about a book called Co-opetition, written by Brendan Berger and Neil Buff in 1997? Too old for you, is it? I think this book is used in our economic school, and it's the best business book I have written in my career. So I briefly introduce the Brendan Berger is the British economist and get economic PhD in Cambridge, and now is a chair professor in New York University. And Neil Buff get a PhD from Oxford University, and now is a chair professor in Yale. And in 1997, they used the concept we learned in this class. Actually, we learned from their book, and to write this book called Co-opetition. In this breakthrough and cutting-edge book, they define a concept called co-opetition. They want to go beyond the 5 forces analysis by Michael Porter. Have you heard about Michael Porter? Oh, this will be recorded. Okay. So at that time, you can read this book. Before their model, the most business school use 5 forces analysis and like SWOT analysis to do industrial analysis. And they start to put all the successful factors, failure factors into quadrant, into your 2x2 matrix, whatever matrix. And these two guys think this kind of idea is too abstract and subjective. Okay? So they want to create different concepts called co-opetition. They use game theory concept. They say, if you can imagine all the agents, they try to work together. No matter you are competitors or not, you work together to create a pie, big pie. And then you fight later to capture the pie. And they do believe if using this way, they can go further than 5 forces analysis. So they, simply speaking, they don't want to use the 2x2 or 3x3. They want to focus on 2 aspects in any ecosystem, cooperation and competition. And they revise the Michael Porter's 5 forces analysis. They add new players called complementers. So if in the ecosystem, we have players, they can make our product more valuable. We should consider it. So they refine the Michael Porter's 5 forces framework to have competitors, complementers, suppliers, and customers. So pay attention to here. This is a supply chain. Your supplier and customer and company, do you remember you learned in the Management 101 class? This is supply chain, or called value chain. Okay? But the value chain does not tell you that you have the other dimension. Your horizontal dimension, you have competitor and complementers. I think by force analysis, they have this part, but they do not consider complementers. That means who can make your product more valuable. But don't try to think Brandenburg and Neil Buff stop here. They are super smart guys. They go further. So they start to imagine how do we build a business model, not just by 2x2 matrix. They start to build up economics term here. So in any bilateral trade for ecosystem, we need to define what is willingness to pay for price at which a buyer is just indifferent to purchasing or not purchasing a good. So if you are a seller, you make a price above the buyer's willingness to pay, the buyer will walk away. If below it, the buyer will get more values. So we need to understand what the indifference point. And for the seller, the other concepts called willingness to sell, the lowest price that a seller will accept in return for a good or service. Below the WTS, the seller walks away. Above it, seller appropriates economic profit. I put this reading from their 97 JEMS paper on SIBA, so you can read it. So Brandenburger and his PhD student, they write a very long argument to build a formal foundation for business model and strategy. So what they try to do, they try to imagine any ecosystem creating this value. And the difference between willingness to pay for the buyer and the product price, that will be the value appropriated by buyer. If the difference between the market product price and production cost will be value captured by firms. The rest will be captured by your supplier. Is that okay? If we think further, we think very sharp. WTP and WTS in Brandenburger's definition is quite blurred because these are two sides of the same coin. We can see the pay-sale distinction is somewhat artificial. We always want to know the same thing for any agent and planning a specific transactions. So in this case, what is the intrinsic benefits from the transaction, utility from consuming a good, or contingent ability to extract value elsewhere? And we think the other issue is what is the opportunity forgone, no benefit from my next best alternative, and there is economic cost of engaging in the transaction. Okay, so all what we try to explain is buyer's WTS is really just a seller's WTP to keep an asset. So let me find out simple. So each buyer can be a seller in the other transaction. Each seller can be buyer on the other occasion of transaction. So in this case, we should not focus on to make difference between WTS and WTP. They are the same. And economists usually refer the reservation value for the buyer or seller. So in the following discussion, we will discard WTS. We just focus on WTP because they are actually the same thing. And seller can be buyer, buyer can be seller. I think that's quite straightforward. So now we have a lot of definition. We forgot of WTS. We just focus on WTP. So we spend 1 minute to look at this slide. Okay, we want to make example for ecosystem of housing market. Suppose we have two players in this ecosystem. One is Josh, the other Jen. If now Josh wants to buy Jen's house, and in this transaction, Josh get benefit for 500, and also get $450 for the sale of his own house. And we can see from this statement, Josh has utility 750. So $500 plus 250. If he stay in his house, which he values at 300, so I put the 300 here. I will explain to you later. So if Josh does not buy a house from Jen, Josh will get utility of using his current house with $300 value. Now Jen values her own house at $400. If Jen transfers ownership to Josh, so she has no any house at all, and then her utility will go for 0. So now, from this statement, we can see Josh. We look at Jen first. That's easier. Jen's willingness to pay is 400. That's clear. Her house is valued at $400. Now I twist a little bit. I ask you a question. Why Josh WTP is 450? If now, if Josh's utility is 750 minus Josh's best alternative to stay his original house 300, Josh's willingness to pay is 450. So can I make any price for Jen to sell more than 450? We make some sort of experiments. Be careful here. If now Jen says, I want to sell Josh 460. If you were Josh, do you want to take this offer? If Jen say $460 and you decide to buy, and the value for Josh to get will be 750 into the utility minus price 460, and the Josh's value get from transaction will be 290, and $290 is lower than stay in Josh's original house, valued $300. So Josh will walk away and pull out the transaction. You need to be very careful. Here have some subtle definition. If you were Josh, you are impossible to take any price higher than 450. The reason is anything higher than 450 is lower than the utility of staying in the original house. Can you see this? Okay? So if you take this concept, you know the market price for Jen's house definitely will below 450. But will above Jen's willingness to pay 400. So price will in this range. Okay? Does this transaction generate any value more than original deal by Jen and Josh? I will say yes. If Josh and Jen, they stay in their original house, and then they only get what they have. And we see the transaction. After they're doing the transaction, and 450 for Josh willingness to pay, and Jen's willingness to pay the 400. So after they make transaction, Josh buy Jen's house. This transaction generates $50 extra value in the ecosystem, in the housing market. So entire market value, all cash, is getting more extra $50. That original just stay in their own houses. So this transaction generated $50. So that's the value generated by their action if they want to make transaction. Is that clear? Okay. So we have two different ways to calculate value generated from transaction in the ecosystem. The first is direct value created, and the definition is some benefits received by parties from exchange of the goods and service. So we back to this example. George gets Jane's house and plus the value of his original house. So George gets utility for $750. Before getting money from George, because Jane left with nothing, because Jane sold the house to George, so Jane gets zero at the end. So direct value of this exchange will be $750. So if you use direct value to calculate, and you will say the value creation from the transaction is $750. However, in Economics 101, if you learn basic economics, economic value different from direct value. Economic value need to minus the opportunity cost, the next best alternative. So in this case, we can see opportunity cost for George is $300 if George stayed. Opportunity cost or next best alternative for Jane will be $400. So in order to calculate net value, in the last 1 hour, we mentioned we focus on net value in the economic sense. We need a minus alternative, best alternative, or opportunity cost. So we minus $300 and $400. So value created in the net sense is 50. Okay, so both definitions for value are fine in this class. You will see later we use linear programming, they will get the same result. But in the accounting sense, they may like 750. This is what you learn in the accounting and finance. You use direct value, but if you use economics approach, the value created is 50 because you need to minus opportunity cost. Okay. So which one is better? We want to use direct value or economic value. There are some debate between the people in the management, such as Lippmann and Rumelt from UCLA. I put their paper on CIBA. You can see why they don't agree with economics approach. But in most economics textbook and strategic management textbook, they like opportunity cost concept because you can start to think what is alternative benchmark if your mind is clear. So in this class, both are fine with us. If you want to see the difference in the theoretical perspective, I refer this to the Lippmann and Rumelt's papers on CIBA. Okay? So now we want to further define the next best alternative. We call it individual reservation value, IRV. So the definition will be the amount of value an agent expects to appropriate if he declines any transaction with the agent under analysis. So we can further to think the idea for transaction. Individual reservation value is very similar to opportunity cost. If I want to pull out this transaction and what I will get elsewhere, so this is just the idea. If I don't want to go through this transaction or this business, how much I will get in other place? And we need to have this to run our quantitative analysis. I will show it later. So are you okay with my explanation? Just walk away to make transaction elsewhere or not, or it's too short, or we want to follow the slides. Do you get my idea? Individual reservation value is if I don't want to make transaction with you, how much I will get from elsewhere. Okay? So just opportunity cost. So we can spend 1 minute to look at slides. Okay. Now, if you take the concept, walking away or not to make transaction, to decide your IRV, and now we can go beyond only one buyer, one supplier in traditional value chain definition. We want to work on unstructured multi-party bargaining, a free market. So we want to think about there are so many suppliers, so many buyers in the ecosystem, how they make trading. I will give you example very soon. And we want to work on not only bilateral deals, we want to focus on entire ecosystem and how we make this magic happen, not only by talking and by math. Let me work on this example. So this I repeat what I say about definition. I do believe, okay, we spend 1 minute to look at definition about free market competition. So basic idea to model multilateral bargaining is each agent can say, pay me certain dollars or value, otherwise I will leave. So if we can know how much value for a party to make them together, or they join the other party, we will start to know how much value they will appropriate it. I leave this for your own study, and we can see example how this happen here. So we work on real example now. Sigfox, as an IoT provider, they sell the microcomputer and sensors to the water meter company and electricity meter company. So basic ideas in their business model is they put sensors on water meters and smartwatch and the other utility measurements. And they collect data from sensor through LAN to the cloud and analyze the behavior and sell the decision analysis to the clients. And this is always, you can see from YouTube and also from some business magazine about IoT. We start to look at their supply chain. Sigfox is a French company. So Sigfox has 4 suppliers for sell chips to it and also sell sensors to it, such as Texas Instruments and Silicon Labs. And then Sigfox sell their IoT product to water meter company or utility company and electricity company. At the end, you can, the channel here, water meter company, can sell this to the end buyers. Usually we call this as ecosystem or value chain. And now we look at competitors against Sigfox. If we use, do you remember the value name? We look at value name. We already model supply chain. The Sigfox has its own supply chain. But now I want to work on the other direction, horizontal view. What alternative supply chain for the buyer to get rather than from Sigfox? It's from LoRa. LoRa is the other provider of IoT. Their services are very similar to Sigfox. And they have different suppliers for their sensors and device. And also they have different channels and distributors for their products. So you have two competing value chains to fight for end users. If you go to buy the product from Sigfox value chain, you may need to pay $100. If you want to go for LoRa, you pay $90. And is this the only value chain configuration from the buyer perspective, or from LoRa, or from Sigfox? Maybe not. Usually we do the value chain analysis or supply chain analysis. We already decide the layout or structure for each supply chain. But in the real world business, we can form different supply chain. For example, if I'm Sigfox, I want to change supplier from TI and to the other company, the same tech. And we also can say the Sigfox may have different distributor from KPN rather than water meter company. And at the end, they can restructure the supply chain to sell product to Josh, maybe charge even those value with 80. So when I say free market competition, multi-party, multilateral negotiation, what I mean is we need to consider all possible grouping in the ecosystem. And each grouping form one supply chain to sell final product to Josh. And we also can add the other buyer called Jen, and Jen can offer 90 to buy the product made by Sigfox. Okay, in summary, this is usually what we learn from value chain, supply chain. But we want to model beyond it. We want to consider all possible supply chain configuration. Is that clear? So if this is allowed, for example, if I can form, I just move further. If Sigfox can move supplier from TI to Semitech, and what is the consequence in the ecosystem? And this will shift pressure to TI, and Sigfox can ask TI to reduce the price. The reason is I can change supplier to the other guy. So do you remember we said bargaining? If when I create the value, if I have credible threat to say for changing suppliers, I will further get more value in the ecosystem. So free competition and free combination at the end will decide how you bargain. Okay. So basic idea is when you form a group, and you can say, I want to stay in this group or not. All depends on how much value I get from A group rather than from B group. For A group to have Sigfox or particular player, that group or that supply chain need to pay Sigfox more. Okay, so please spend 1 minute to look at this slide, and this summarizes all what I say in the Sigfox example. So live or not will decide how you bargain. So far, so good. If you take the concept, I want to keep this guy in my supply chain or not, and we can start to visualize this idea. We can use horizontal view or vertical view to separate groups in the entire ecosystem. Now we use 4 quadrants. 1 quadrant for suppliers, and 1 for horizontal view, your competitors, and 1 for end user, and 1 for management labors. if you have chance and you look at these slides, and you can see we use the 4 quadrants to classify 4 different groups from this ecosystem. Okay, so now interesting occur here. This is Sigfox. So Sigfox can make any transaction involving it or not. So Sigfox is the center. Let me remind you, Sigfox is the center in the ecosystem. So you can see in the different panel, we try to change the value chain configuration. Is it? And why we want to do this? If you were Sigfox, you want to choose one particular supply chain to ensure minimum value you get from this ecosystem. Does this make sense? If Sigfox work on this supply chain say, Sigfox, you are here, I pay you 50. But you can see, if Sigfox join the other supply chain, say, I pay you 60, Sigfox want to stay here or here. 60, of course, not 50. So Sigfox will start to say, at least, or 50 for me is too low, at least I want to get 60. And if the other guy say, I give you 80, the other supply chain, I give you 80, minimum value for Sigfox, its competitive advantage or even further, it will get more. So the minimum value or competitive advantage from Sigfox, it is upon not only how good it is which group want it and who can offer highest value for it to join their supply chain. Is it? So if I compare all the supply chain or value chain configuration, I will be able to calculate Sigfox competitive advantage or minimum value Sigfox will get. Okay? So that means I compare so many different combinations and all with Sigfox. And I will choose highest configuration as minimum value Sigfox get in this ecosystem. Now we look at the other side. Now, if the supply chain they want to work with the LoRa, do you remember we have the other player can replace Sigfox called LoRa. So if now all the buyers, suppliers, and customers they all want to work together with LoRa rather than Sigfox, and they form the other varieties of supply chains. And you already can guess. This will decide the ceiling for Sigfox to get in the ecosystem, entire ecosystem. And why? If customers they find out without Sigfox, with LoRa, oh, I earn even more. So at the end, if the other transaction from LoRa produce more value to end users such as Jen and Josh, and they will buy product from LoRa. So the other supply chain will decide the maximum value Sigfox get. Does this make sense? So there are 2 forces behind business models rather than 5 forces. Simply speaking, in the later class we'll know if we have logical mind to do business modeling, in any ecosystem, only 2 forces. One is who want me. They decide minimum value I get. The other forces is how much people get without me. They decide my maximum value. And my final value is in the middle. And this is the way we build up business modeling. Is that clear? Okay. So now we quickly look at this example. If I want to set up one simple ecosystem. There are 5 buyers and 5 sellers. And each seller owns an identical house. And seller 1 to 5 have different reservation value. Their IRV, $20, $50, $70, $75, and $85, and etc. And each buyer wants only one house from seller. And buyers also have 5 reservation values from 100, 20, 90, 70, 50, and etc. Have you learned this in the Economics 101? So sellers' reservation values with ranking will build up the supply curve. 20, 50, 70, 75, 85. This will be supply curve. And buyers' reservation price 120, 90, 70, 55, 50 will build up demand curve. And the market price will be the intersection of demand curve and supply curve will be 70 here. Do you remember this? Do you know the intersection between demand curve and supply curve? Any question? Do you know what I'm talking about? Okay. I slow down a little bit. So this is buyer 1. Buyer 1 wants to buy a house, and buyer 1's utility for a house is $120. And we have seller 1 here, seller 120. So if we do this transaction, seller 1 and buyer 1 form a transaction. We'll get, okay, we'll take 20 minutes, 15 minutes break, and we go to this example here. System for IoT product involving Sigfox or not. So entire ecosystem from IoT will be the entire value created here. So this is not hard to do as a traditional business model. I know customer utility, I know product price, and then make difference between them. I get a value creation. This is not hard at all. Everyone can do it. But the most tricky thing most people they never understand in terms of strategic analysis is the real competition only one force, not 5 forces. Why? If we are all, I believe you are all very smart, we start to think this way. If now we have so many value chains, and any value chain involving me as a player, what the highest value I can get with the value chain with me, that means including me. The value to get highest, including me, will decide the minimum value I get from entire transaction. So they guarantee minimum value. From the other side, any supply chain excluding me, know me, what the highest value they have. They decide the maximum value I can get from the entire ecosystem transaction. So the groups excluding me, their highest value become the ceiling I have in the ecosystem. Any group, including me, decide the minimum value I have. So this will move to the competition side in the co-opetition framework by Brandenberger and Nailbuff. I definitely guarantee I will have value here. But how far I can move from here to here depends on my bargaining power. So this dark green area is a value potential for me to get. But I may get only here, depends on how I bargain. But at this, I will have this value because otherwise they cannot have my help to form supply chain. So you will see only one force in any ecosystem is having me or having no me. And they decide my value.